Serious, Redditors who have been kidnapped, what was your experience like? Are there things you do now that you would have never done before? I posted this on a different account I don't remember the password for. This is a long one, but it gets good. 2 years ago, I was very hungover on a summer Saturday in Manhattan. A girl I was seeing at the time was angrily getting her things together and proceeded to storm out of the apartment, which was shared by myself and 4 other guys. My old roommates had moved to a new apartment the night before. There are boxes and miscellaneous crap everywhere. I'm laying in bed, dying. It's around 9 or 10 a.m. About 5 minutes after the girl storms out, Teresa knock at the door. She must have forgotten her phone charger or something. I get up in my boxers, walk across the living room where all the unpacked/half-packed shit is, and open up the door. Behind the door was one of the scariest faces I've ever seen. Very beady eyes, thick mustache, scarred up face, balding man in his 50s. I was holding the door slightly ajar. Since it wasn't who I thought it was, I stepped behind the door a bit to hide my pale-ass body, and stuck my head through the crack. He asked if Billy was home, one of my old roommates. I told him that Billy had moved out the day before. With that said, he put all of his body weight into the door, sending me flying back. This dude was enormous. As I was recovering from this and trying to think why someone would be so angry with Billy, this gentleman open hand slaps me so hard I hit the ground. I am now awake. My new house guest identifies himself as Big Tony, and demands to speak with Billy. I go into my room, right off of the living room where Big Tony is now setting up shop, and put on pants and grab my phone. Tony has already made it very clear not to call the police, or try to run out of my apartment or I might fall out of the window or get shot in the knees. Apparently, Billy owes him a lot of money. I call Billy, who says he never heard of Big Tony, and Billy is convinced it's a joke. Tony asks for the phone, where I hear Billy telling Big Tony to go fuck himself and to get out of his old apartment. Tony is now upset, and starts telling Billy that his roommate, myself, might get hurt if he doesn't learn some manners and come to the old apartment. Billy hangs up. Tony, for some reason, took a liking to me. He apologized for the slap, gave me cigarettes, and said he hoped that this would all work out. He constantly comments on the fact that I'm living like an animal, since there's shit all over the apartment, and asking if me and my old roomies watch betting sports. We never watched sports, never had cable. He asks if Billy's last name is something which it isn't, and then asks if Billy is from somewhere that he isn't, and then asked if Billy is enrolled in a university that he isn't. I inform Big Tony that I'm fairly confident he is in the wrong apartment. Just as I'm getting him to back off and believe that there might be more than one Billy living in an apartment building, there is another knock at the door. If it's the cops or your parents, I'm the maintenance guy. My parents were coming to help me move out that afternoon. I open the door, and it's Henry, another one of my old roommates. I inform him he's picked a bad time as he's already waltzing inside to get some things. Tony poses as my uncle for a few minutes, before I intervene and tell Henry that this giant man is looking for Billy, who he believes owes him money. Henry, do you guys gamble? Yeah, we gamble all the time. We play dice/cards a lot. I try explaining to Tony that we don't gamble on sports, but now we have to go through the whole gambit again. After another half hour of questions with Henry, Tony is back to believing he is in the wrong apartment. He calls his coworker to get a picture texted to him. It's not Billy. Okay. I tell Tony good luck and try to shoo him out of the apartment. No, it's never that easy. Tony wishes to take Henry and I out for coffee and donuts, his personal apology. I refuse. He won't have it. I'm in a Starbucks ordering donuts and coffee, which we consume in a nearby park, and listen to Tony's stories. Half an hour later, he says we can leave. At this point it didn't seem like we were being kept though, and we head back. Naturally no one believes us. We have a party in the old/pretty empty apartment. I stay at a friend's place in the building, and wake up to knocks. Straight up numb flashbacks. It's my buddy Tom, who also lives in the building. He tells me someone's outside looking for me. Great. I get dressed, and head outside to find Big Tony, who gives me a grocery bag filled with beer and cigarettes. Tom and a few other friends from the building come outside and we drink beer in styrofoam cups on the street whilst listening to Tony's stories. Everyone believes Henry and I, and if I'm ever in Tony's neighborhood, I should call him for dinner on him. TL, Dr. I got Big Lebowski'd. This happened a while ago when I was 6. I come from a third world countries and at the time, kidnappings were at an all-time high. We lived in a fairly nice neighborhood, no kidnappings there, no theft, great neighbors. We felt pretty safe and therefore, my mom wasn't too worried. Our house was a gated residence, so we had a front yard and backyard. I was out one morning in the front yard, playing with some toys while my mom was inside working or cooking or whatever. Someone knocked on the front gate. Me being a dumb child decided to go up and ask who it was. It was this fairly old man who asked for some water. Me being the nice, helping child opened the door and was snatched immediately. I don't particularly remember what happened after that, but I woke up in a compound which I'm pretty sure it was far from home. They hadn't done anything bad to me as far as I know. But they did try to feed me food that I didn't like. I was a picky child and so, all I ate was fruit. They had asked for ransom, which to this day, I don't know how much it was. They just kept me in a room all day with duct tape on my mouth and ropes around my feet and hands. They did take duct tape off to let me drink water or eat food. Anyways, a few days later, the police busted them and arrested them. They ended up in jail for life is what I was told. Not too long after that, my parents decided to move to a different country and now all is well. I still think about what might have gone wrong if they had sold me into child slavery or something, fairly common in my country. Life resumed after that. I'm as happy as a 20-year-old can be. Nothing really changed. I still don't know why I was kidnapped, maybe for ransom or whatever. In exactly a month, it'll be my 14th kidnapping anniversary. Not much like the other stories here, but my ex-boyfriend abducted me from my parents' home when I was 19. Threw me in the trunk of his car and drove off. About 8 hours later, a lot happened in between, including me getting out of the trunk and into the back seat. The police spotted his car and engaged in a high-speed pursuit. He crashed into a tree, served about 4 years, and is out with a wife and 3 kids now. It didn't affect me as much as people expected it to, and I haven't really changed anything in my life because of it. It happened in the past and that's how I view it. I have the longer version in my post history if you sort by highest. I can elaborate more or provide proof that it happened to me if anybody cares. My mother kidnapped me. My parents were in the middle of an ugly divorce and my mom was a stay-at-home mom. Since she depended on my father for money, she assumed she would lose me in the custody battle. My mother is a dual Canadian and American citizen. My father is American. So one day when my dad was at work, she didn't send me to school and took me from USA to Canada. There was nothing my dad could do because we weren't in USA. It was several months before my mom decided to do the right thing and go back to the States. By that time my dad has lawyered up so well that she basically lost all rights to parenting me. This happened when I was 6 to 7. My mother ended up moving back to Canada to be with her family. If I could go back, I would have begged my mom not to return to the States. What the courts didn't care to hear was that my dad was a functioning alcoholic. He was abusive in every way. When my parents divorced, my mom couldn't afford to live in USA. So I was raised by my abusive father for another decade until I moved out at 17. He had me too terrified to tell anyone, just like my mom was. I'm now 28 and trying to build positive relationships with both my parents now that I've forgiven both of them. TLDR, mom kidnapped me and took me from USA to Can. Several months later mom felt guilty and returned me to USA. So back when I was around 7 or 8, my family went to visit our home country of Pakistan. Anytime anyone from the USA comes and visits PA, it's kinda of a big deal depending on where you're going. Where we visited was a small village of maybe 200 or so people, and so word gets out fast that rich Americans are coming. This makes us targets as people believe we come with pockets full of treasures and gold and money. Anyways, so I'm with my cousin who at the time was also at a sketchy ass arcade place. Sketchy because it only had like 3 games and it was located in the back of a beat up mini store. So I'm playing and my cousin tells me it's time to go, but I was so into the game I did not want to go. He leaves and I stayed. As I'm playing, these 2 guys come into the arcade room and just start watching me play and start giving me comments on how good I was, and when I responded back in English, not the native language of Punjabi, so they knew I was an American. Next thing I know they grab me the hands and tell me to come with them. All I remember is crying my ass off while they dragged me in the daylight in front of other people to some house. Once at the location, an old lady, who I assume was their mother, was frantic as fuck and asking who I am and why, and I crying and why am I there. The guys told her to pretty much STFU and nothing and threw me into a room. I remember just standing at the door of the room and banging and crying for what seemed hours, and every now and then they would tell me to STFU or they would hurt me, but I kept crying and banging lol. After what seemed like many hours, the women/mom/ opened the door and told me to run home. I booked so fast out of there, but I had no fucking clue where the fuck I was. I just ran, and whenever I would see a kid or a woman I would ask where the arcade was because I knew how to get home from there. Pakistan is notorious for what they do to little kids, especially young boys. Young boys are used for sex and trafficking, and so reflecting back on this incident, I would say I was one lucky kid, because God knows where I would be today. I was drunk and leaving a club at 6 a.m. I didn't want to walk the 3 kilometers home in heels, so when a guy I had spoken to earlier in the evening offered to drive me home, I thought it seemed like a good idea. He had been nice enough, and it was way more convenient. I got in and he asked my address and then started driving in completely the wrong direction. I said I was uncomfortable and wanted to get out, but he told me not yet, and my phone died so I couldn't call anyone. He drove me over the border and another man gets in the car and brings me a coffee with him, which they insisted I drank. We drove around for about an hour until they stopped in a car park of a rural disused train station, when they dragged me out of the car, threw me onto the grass at the side, and the second man raped me. Then the driver forced me to suck him off. Then they dragged me back to the car and threw me into the back seat and started driving again. They eventually stopped at a petrol station and locked me in while they got out. They came back and gave me a pack of cigarettes and €50, but still wouldn't let me leave. Then the car wouldn't start. When they got out to check the engine, I got out and ran. About 200 meters away there was a guy gardening, and I asked him how far it was to walk back to my city, because I was fairly sure we had stayed in the general area. He said it was 5 kilometers away, so I asked if he could phone me a taxi, which he did, and I went home. In all it was about 7 hours I was with them. It was a few months ago. I had trouble sleeping for many weeks after. I've been raped before, but never as violently as this was, and I am very distrustful now of men I meet if I go out. I also find myself drinking a lot more than I used to, not consciously to take my mind off it or anything, but I suspect they are related. Ultimately I'm just thankful they had a shitty car, because it could have been so much worse. I'll tell you all some things that happened while I was trapped. On my first night in the house, we had a nice, proper meal. We sat at the dinner table, each with a plate with mashed potatoes, meatloaf, corn, and a piece of bread. I drank milk, and the couple each had some wine. Sounds nice, right? No. Both of my feet were handcuffed to the legs on the chair. I also had some kind of rope-like security around my chest that wrapped around the chair. I didn't want to eat because I was physically sick from the trauma of the day. When I refused to eat, I was slapped across the face. I was also told I couldn't be released from the table unless my plate was completely empty. A few slaps and lots of tears later, I had force-fed myself everything off of my plate. Then, I was forced to eat some kind of dessert. I don't remember what it was, but we did find out after the trial that they were putting sedatives in my supper to ensure I didn't have much mobility in the night, which didn't matter because I was handcuffed by my right foot to the bed each night. I have more stories if you all would like more. This is probably the scariest part of what happened. The reason that the couple couldn't adopt is because the man was a registered sex offender. He had 8 counts of aggravated rape of a 9-year-old girl. This was especially frightening because I was a 10-year-old girl. As far as did the man touch me? I don't really remember. I think he did in my sedated state, as I remember, very vaguely, being handcuffed to the bed and him stroking my thigh, and mentioning something about development. But that's about all I remember. The mother also couldn't adopt, aside from the fact that she was married to a sex offender, because she also had a criminal record. She had 2 counts of attempted kidnapping. I can expand on both of their pasts some more if you all want. I have been to a lot of therapy and I am finally at peace with what happened.